Now, going into the events of the sixth seal, I'm going to include some conjecture in here, which seems quite possible or likely. I'm reading Revelation 6:12. I looked when he broke the sixth seal, and there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth made of hair, and the whole moon became like blood. And the stars of the sky fell to the earth, as a fig tree casts its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. The sky was split apart like a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. Then the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the commanders, and the rich, and the strong, and every slave and free man, hid themselves in the caves, and among the rocks of the mountains. And they said to the mountains and to the rocks, Fall on us, and hide us from the presence of him who sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath is come, and who is able to stand? And then this continues on with 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, so that no wind would blow on the earth or on the sea or on any tree. And then 144,000 were sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. And after that, it says, I looked, and behold, a great multitude, which no one could count, from every nation and all tribes and peoples and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, and palm branches were in their hands, and they crying out with a loud voice, saying, Salvation to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. Skipping a little ahead, it says, These who are clothed in the white robes, who are they, and where have they come from? And I said to him, My Lord, you know. And he said to me, These are the ones who come out of the great tribulation, and they have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. For this reason they are before the throne of God, and they serve him day and night in his temple, and he who sits on the throne will spread his tabernacle over them. They will hunger no longer, nor thirst any more, nor will the sun beat down on them, nor any heat. For the Lamb in the center of the throne will be their shepherd, and will guide them to springs of the water of life, and God will wipe every tear from their eyes. And so I want to get into some of what this means here in the sixth seal. And it talks about those showing up in white robes. There's a lot if you look into the pre-wrath rapture position, which seems to think that this would be the rapture. And I would agree with that. I also think if you look at the letters to the churches, you see in the church of Sardis, it says they will be clothed in white. If you look at Philadelphia, it says they will be guarded. It says that it will also keep you from the hour of testing. And if you look at Laodicea, it says that they can buy white garments to clothe themselves. And so there is actually a reference when it comes to the rapture and overcoming in the church letters, which ties into what we see with the white robes in the sixth seal. But going back earlier in the sixth seal, just taking this in chronological order, I'd like to talk about what this might be when we're looking at the earthquake. The sun came black as sackcloth, the whole moon became like blood. So the sun's going to go very dark. The moon is going to appear to be red. It says the stars of the sky fell to the earth, as a fig tree casts its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. And then it says the sky was split apart like a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. And everybody was hiding in the caves and the mountains. At the time when this video is coming out, there was just recently a meteor which fell over Russia and caused quite an explosion that got me looking into the Tunguska event that occurred in Russia way back in 1908. Which, as I was looking into it, I found a quote from a witness of the Tunguska event in 1908, and this is what they said. Suddenly in the north sky, the sky was split in two, and high above the forest the whole northern part of the sky appeared covered with fire. At that moment there was a bang in the sky and a mighty crash. The crash was followed by a noise like stones falling from the sky or of guns firing. The earth trembled. Which got me to thinking, I have looked over this part, the sky was split apart like a scroll when it is rolled up, or the sky is separated like a scroll when it is rolled together. There's a few different ways that you can look at this, and I found it somewhat difficult to get a visual on what this might look like. I know there's a lot of people that have said, well, it's a scroll rolled together or rolled up. That might be referring to a mushroom cloud. That might be referring to something nuclear. But looking into the Tunguska event, I happened across something by Carl Sagan with both a digital sort of reenactment of what the event might have looked like, which is similar, though much larger than the actual footage of what's been seen recently with the meteor that fell in Russia. And so I think I might just play a clip here from him.
Eyewitnesses told of a ball of flame larger than the sun that had blazed across the sky 20 years before. Kulik assumed a giant meteorite had struck the earth. he expected to find an enormous impact crater and rare meteorite fragments chipped off some distant asteroid. However, at ground zero, Kulik found upright trees stripped of their branches, but not a trace of the meteorite or its impact crater. He was deeply puzzled. But he thought perhaps there were meteorite fragments buried in the swampy ground. So he set about digging trenches and pumping out the water, but the expected meteoritic rock and iron was nowhere to be found. Undaunted, Kulik went on to make a thorough survey, despite the swarms of insects and other hardships, because he had discovered something that, in his own words, exceeded all the tales of the eyewitnesses and my wildest expectations. For more than 20 kilometers in every direction from ground zero, the trees were flattened radially outward like broken matchsticks. There must have been a powerful explosion several kilometers above the ground. The pressure waves spreading out at the speed of sound has been reconstructed from barometric records at weather stations across Siberia, through Russia, and on into Western Europe. Dust from the explosion reflected so much sunlight back to Earth that people could read by it at night in London, 10,000 kilometers away. This really remarkable occurrence is called the Tunguska event. But what was it? Well, perhaps some scientists have suggested it was a chunk of antimatter from space, annihilated on contact with the ordinary matter of the Earth, disappearing in a flash of gamma rays. But the radioactivity that you'd expect from matter-antimatter annihilation is to be found nowhere at the impact site. Or perhaps, other scientists have suggested, it was a mini black hole from space which impacted the Earth in Siberia, tunneled its way through the solid body of our planet, and plunged out the other side. But the records of atmospheric shock waves give not a hint of something booming out of the North Atlantic later that day. Or maybe, other people have speculated, it was a spaceship of some unimaginably advanced extraterrestrial civilization in desperate mechanical trouble, crashing in a remote region of an obscure planet. Well, if so, it's pretty startling that at the impact site there's not a piece, not the tiniest transistor of a crashed spacecraft. More prosaically, perhaps it was a large meteorite or small asteroid which hit the Earth. But even here, there are no observable telltale rocky or metallic fragments of the sort that you'd expect from such an impact. The key point of the Tunguska event is that there was a tremendous explosion, a great shock wave, many trees burned, an enormous forest fire, and yet no crater in the ground. There seems to be only one explanation which is consistent with all these facts, and that explanation is this. In 1908, a piece of a comet hit the Earth. No one saw it approach, a small point of light lost in the glare of the morning sun. It had been drifting for centuries through the inner solar system, like an iceberg in the ocean of interplanetary space. But this time, by accident, there was a planet in the way. From the time and direction of its approach, the object that hit the Earth seems to have been a fragment of a comet named NK, hurtling at more than 100,000 kilometers an hour. It was a mountain of ice about the size of a football field and weighing almost 1 million tons. There was no warning until it plunged into the atmosphere. If such an explosion happened today, it might be thought, especially in the panic of the moment, to be produced by a nuclear weapon. Such a cometary impact and fireball simulates all the effects of a 15-megaton nuclear burst, including the mushroom cloud, with one exception: there would be no radiation. So, could a rare but natural event, the impact of a comet with the Earth, trigger a nuclear war? It's a strange scenario. A small comet hits the Earth, as millions of them have during the history of our planet, and the response of our civilization is promptly to self-destruct. Maybe it's unlikely, but it might be a good idea to understand comets and collisions and catastrophes a little bit better than we do. Now, a comet, at least as far as we understand them today, is made mostly of ice. Water ice, maybe some ammonia ice, a little bit of methane ice. So, in striking the Earth's atmosphere, a modest cometary fragment will produce a great radiant fireball and a mighty blast wave. It'll burn trees and level forests and make a sound heard around the world, but it need not make a crater in the ground. Why? Because the ices in the comet are all melted in the impact, and there's going to be very few recognizable pieces of comet left on the ground.
It's interesting that this ends with him describing that basically a meteor coming down that's large enough, exploding in the atmosphere, like at the Tunguska event, has all the same effects of a nuclear bomb, or actually something perhaps 30 times or more larger than the Hiroshima bomb, but without the nuclear radiation, and that it can produce quite a shockwave and a mushroom cloud. As well as looking at these visuals in which the upper and lower part of the sky does seem to be split in a way. But beyond that, the explosion itself, looking at the sixth seal, and this has puzzled me for a long time. It says, the sky was split apart like a scroll when it is rolled up, or the sky was separated like a scroll when it is rolled up. There's something about this video recreation of the Tunguska event that seems similar to this description, because the explosion goes out to the left and to the right, which is something you would see up in the atmosphere. And when it comes to a scroll that's rolled up, if you had a very long piece of paper and you rolled up both the left side and the right side in a stick, which is what they used to do with a scroll, then if you separate it, what you have is the left and the right side unrolling and going out. And that is similar to the atmospheric explosion scene here. It goes out to the left and the right, and because it's up in the atmosphere, it splits the sky, top and bottom, below and above it, with an explosion that is like a scroll that's rolled up being separated, going out to the left and the right. And this matches in a way that to me seems more accurate than any sort of nuclear explosion taking place on the ground. I know I've heard people say that in regards to this, but the visual has never really matched for me between a mushroom cloud and the sky being split apart like a scroll when it's rolled up. Although, of course, with the billowing clouds there are similarities between them, but it never really seemed to match as well as what I think this seems to. And I just wanted to bring this up, because previous times when I've looked at this, it talks about the sun becoming dark and the moon becoming red, the stars of the sky falling to earth, and it's talking about earthquake. There's various things that can cause earthquakes. For instance, something large in space affecting the Earth's gravity could, but also a large enough impact could cause an earthquake of something impacting the Earth. As for the sun going dark and the moon turning red, that could be caused by clouds, or perhaps a solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse. One thing that seems especially interesting, it says that everybody hid in the caves and the rocks of the mountains, even though every mountain and island had been moved out of their places. Well, the mountains had been moved out of their places from this great earthquake, then why would you be hiding in the mountains? It would seem somewhat unstable, but it says the stars of the sky fell to the earth as a fig tree casts its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. If anyone's ever seen the movie Enemy Mine, in this fictional piece, there's a man and an alien stuck together living on a planet that has regular meteor showers that aren't meteor showers like we know. It's actually meteors coming down and hitting the planet, and they take to living in a cave. which seems pretty realistic. To quote a 2003 news article about a meteor crashing into someone's house in New Orleans, a meteorite which measures 9 inches in diameter crashes into a resident's roof. Then the ore crashes through the second-story floor, then through the first-story floor, and then is deeply embedded into the concrete foundation. Luckily, homeowner Roy Fawcett and his family, including his young daughter, were not home. So it is quite possible with a storm of meteor strikes that houses could be destroyed, potentially set on fire, and definitely a wooden structure would not be a reliably safe place to be if a meteor can go through 2 stories and embed in the concrete foundation in the basement. And as we've seen with this asteroid passing by the planet, and then meteors coming down, and people seeing fireballs in the sky, and then the larger one in Russia causing more of an explosion in the air, and something passing by as a fig tree casts its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind, as we're seeing an asteroid go by and smaller meteors coming down. Now, certainly what we've seen recently has not been at this level of as many figs would come off a fig tree if it was shaken by a great wind, but a large meteor coming down. Looking at the Carl Sagan video, there is a sky-splitting effect visually. Something in space causing an earthquake, it's large enough to move every mountain and island out of their place, could make sense. But especially everyone hiding in caves and the rocks of the mountains would make sense if there were meteor strikes, not just showers, but strikes occurring, that it would seem a safe place or safer place to hide would be underground or in a cave or among the rocks of the mountains, because if there was a lot of meteors striking, a storm of meteor strikes, then they would be destroying structures and catching wood buildings on fire and going right through roofs and things like that. So one of the only safe places you might be able to go would be caves or under rocks in the mountains. And it does say everyone, from the kings of the earth down to the slaves, hid in the caves among the rocks of the mountains. So there are some other indications that this as a theory might work. There are indications as well going forward into the first, second, third, and fourth trumpets after the rapture. So I'm not sure how quickly after the sixth seal and the rapture the first 4 trumpets might occur. But if the sixth seal is describing something in space, like a large asteroid or something with meteors coming down hitting the earth to where people are hiding in caves so as to not get hit by them and the resulting destruction, then it would fit with the first 4 trumpets. It says, the first sounded, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and they were thrown to the earth, and 1/3 of the earth was burned up, and 1/3 of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. That could describe, when it comes to hail and fire, the Tunguska event was thought to be a piece off of a comet, or really just a large piece of ice coming down as a large meteor that caused something that was the equivalent of like a 30 megaton explosion in the atmosphere over Russia, and 185 Hiroshima bomb level of explosion over Russia. And says the second trumpet, something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. And 1/3 of the sea became blood, and 1/3 of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. Third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on 1/3 of the rivers and the springs and waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And 1/3 of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the waters because they were made bitter. And says the fourth angel sounded, and 1/3 of the sun, and 1/3 of the moon, and 1/3 of the stars were struck, so that 1/3 of them would be darkened, and the day would not shine for 1/3 of it, and the night the same way. It seems like this could be cloud cover, even some sort of debris cloud. And so when we look at the sixth seal up through the fourth trumpet, it does seem that this could all happen in quick order and tie together, and that there could be something in space that's causing meteor strikes, that's causing earthquakes, that's falling down and people are hiding in caves. Another thought that I've had on the sixth seal through the fourth trumpet is that this may be describing different stages of the same one event, and that they could happen very rapidly one after another. Looking into asteroids, I came across some information on the one on the Yucatan Peninsula, and that would be the one that scientists claim might have made the dinosaurs to go extinct, and it was about a 5 to 6 mile wide asteroid. And they've done some extensive studies on it. I've seen creation relationists that believe in a global flood say that maybe an asteroid impact, and it could have been this one, kicked off a chain of events that were catastrophic that started the global flood. For instance, an asteroid slamming into the Earth might have produced the effect of causing the fountains of the deep subterranean water to burst open due to the impact on the Earth's crust at time, thus leading into the flood and even perhaps contributing into the rain from the effects of an asteroid hitting the Earth. So in some of the information I found, to quote a Dr. Daniel Durda, he said, "The impact of an asteroid or comet several kilometers across heaps environmental insult after insult on the world. One aspect of the devastation wrought by large impacts is the potential for global wildfires ignited by material ejected from the crater re-entering the atmosphere in the hours after impact." And this article continues, "Large impacts can blast thousands of cubic kilometers of vaporized impactor and target sediments into the atmosphere and above, expanding into space and enveloping the entire planet. These high-energy, vapor-rich materials re-enter the atmosphere and heat up air temperatures to the point that vegetation on the ground below can spontaneously burst into flame." And there seem to be several after effects that are associated with a large comet or asteroid hitting the Earth. Besides part of the comet exploding in the atmosphere, after that there is a fireball effect that would set trees and grass on fire. There's dust and debris, and another large effect is acid rain that follows. So there's actually some very interesting parallels from the sixth seal through the fourth trumpet. And to just break down one possible way to interpret these, revolving around even just a single asteroid event, so that an earthquake could be caused by something large coming in and exploding. The cloud cover could make the sun seem dark and the moon turn red. Smaller parts of the object or meteors around a larger object could explain stars of the sky falling to earth, like a fig tree casts its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind, cause a storm of meteor strikes. The sky being split apart like a scroll when it's rolled up, and every mountain and island being moved out of their places. Well, the explosion of a meteor in the atmosphere as it's burning up does look a lot like a scroll that's rolled up being split apart, going out to the left and to the right, and splitting the sky. Something large enough could cause a massive earthquake, exploding in the atmosphere, hitting the ground. And skipping ahead to the first trumpet, just before it, there are peals of thunder and sounds and flashes of lightning in an earthquake. When a meteor is striking down, there are reports of what does sound like thunder or artillery shells exploding, and there may be some lightning-like effect. And then the first trumpet, there came hail and fire. So we're talking about an ice meteor. There would be pieces of ice potentially, and then there would also be explosion and fire. And so when they're thrown to the earth, a third of the earth is burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all of the green grass was burned up. That could parallel very well, and taking it in chronological order, with a firestorm ignition that is thought to be caused by a meteor hitting the Earth, according to scientists that have studied meteors that have hit the Earth in the past. The second trumpet, or something like a great mountain burning with fire thrown into the sea, that could be more of a solid core of a meteorite that doesn't explode. If it has a more solid core, whereas the outside was more of ice and dust, then the ice and dust might explode, causing the firestorm, which could correspond to the first trumpet, but a solid core to it continuing down onto the earth, like a mountain burning with fire, that could match. In the third trumpet, a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, fell on a third of the rivers and springs of water. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the waters because they were made bitter. That could correspond to acid rain, which is thought to occur after a meteor hits, because it makes the air more acidic and it produces acid rain, especially in that area, which would make the waters bitter. And if it's potent enough, people could get sick from it. There's also effects of acid rain eroding the metals out of sediments and making water be high in aluminum or mercury content, which could also make people sick. And even the fourth trumpet, when it talks about a third of the sun and moon and stars were struck, so that they would be darkened and the day would would not shine for a third of it in the night the same way, that could refer to a large debris cloud. And also note, looking at the second and third trumpet, it is possible that even if most of a meteor might explode, not being solid, that what is left of a core of the projectile, that could come down in one piece, or it could split in two, where maybe one piece of it would be covered in the second trumpet, and the second piece would be covered in the third trumpet, with what's seen falling. It's just one large meteor coming in could theoretically cause the sixth seal through the fourth trumpet. And it is interesting that these do seem to, in chronological order, describe stages of what would happen if a meteor hit, and things that are damage associated with meteors hitting, according to scientists, based on studying ones that have hit prior. Earthquakes, seeing something in the sky splitting, meteor strikes, explosions, thunder sounds, a firestorm burning up trees and grass, perhaps a solid core or piece of it continuing on, not exploding, hitting down into the sea, acid rain causing waters to be bitter, and a debris cloud that would block out a third of the sky. This all matches what could be expected with a large meteor hitting, even just one, in which case these events would have to follow in close order. Looking at the timetable, it seems quite allowable that the sixth seal through the fourth trumpet could happen in short order. When it comes to Jewish festivals, for 7 months, the trumpet is blown once a month for 7 months. Now, it might seem the biblical precedent, therefore, would be that each of the trumpets might last a month. However, if you look at the fifth trumpet, it lasts for 5 months. And so it could be that the fifth trumpet, which lasts 5 months, contains the time that otherwise you would imagine would proportionally go for the first 4 trumpets, combining 150 days that would normally seem to be allotted to the first 5 trumpets into just the fifth trumpet, due to the first 4 trumpets happening in short order. The only other biblical precedent I could think of as to how to figure this out as to the timing was looking at the end of the 69th week compared to the beginning of the time of the Gentiles, and just looking at the resurrection and the ascension of Jesus Christ. That was a 40-day period, and then it was a 10-day period after that till Pentecost, and what could be argued as the official beginning of the early Christian church, and perhaps the time of the Gentiles. So it seems between the end of what would be a time apportioned to the Jews, the end of the 69th week, to the beginning of the time of the Gentiles, really couldn't be argued to be more than about 50 days, or perhaps less, depending on how you look at it. And so just looking for symmetry or a pattern there, it would seem the time between the end of the age of the Gentiles and the beginning of the 70th week, or time apportioned to the Jews, could be very short also. Looking at it that way, it would have symmetry if there was 50 days or less, which works rather well with the idea that the fifth trumpet, which lasts 150 days, is covering the time of the 4 trumpets that precede it. I guess bottom line, I don't see anything in the Bible that would preclude the first 4 trumpets and the sixth seal all happening in very short order together. There's not anything precisely for it, but there's also not anything precluding it that I can see. And if there is one thing in favor of this, it would be that the 144,000 are sealed in the sixth seal in what seems to perhaps be a hurry, yet that seal is going to come into play as important in the fifth trumpet, which could indicate they're sealed in a hurry in the sixth seal for preparation of the fifth trumpet, which comes quickly after that. Of course, that is not the only way to look at this, but I thought it was a possibility worth mentioning, seeing as how much it matches. It did get me looking into NASA's website. They have listed thousands of asteroids that they monitor to see if they're going to come near the Earth enough to be a concern, and they give dates on when they're going to fly by. They don't have any that they currently think are going to hit the Earth, but I also found looking into that asteroids are hard to see, and much of the time they might not see them until before or even after they have done a flyby of the Earth. And so right out of the box, I would just want to put a caution on this idea that it would be frivolous and likely mistaken to just pick an asteroid that's known and think that that asteroid might be the one that could be being spoken of here. And I would say biblically in the sixth seal that is actually not supported, because it seems that it's after the earthquake and and the sky splits apart and the mountain and islands are moved out of their places, that after that the kings and great men and commanders and rich and strong and every slave and free man hide themselves in the caves among the rocks of the mountains. So it would seem if this was an asteroid or meteor that was known beforehand or thought to be about to impact the earth beforehand, that everyone would have been hiding before effects of it start happening. But that does not seem to be what's recorded in Revelation, so whether that means that if this was an asteroid or meteor, that it's one that NASA didn't see coming, that nobody saw coming until it happened, or that it's one that was thought to just be a flyby and so no one got concerned about it. It could be either one, but certainly there's no way to tell from this which one it might be out of the list of known asteroids. So just right out of the box, I would want to put a caution on this idea that no one grab an asteroid and start thinking that that must be the one being spoken of here, because there is absolutely no way to tell as far as I can see based on the scriptures. Again, the only sign as of timing to look for regarding the sixth seal is the gospel being preached to all nations, and there is just no firm date on that yet. And of course this is a thought and it is a possibility, even if it might be correct. But let's just continue with that line of thought, considering the possibilities in case such as this should happen. And so if this is what is foretold, then I would guess between the sixth seal and the fourth trumpet, most people would be hiding in caves or in the rocks of the mountains. And so for you survivalists out there, it might be something to consider in your plans. But of course for Christians, the best answer is to be raptured during the sixth seal before the first four trumpets happen. But if you aren't, or perhaps even if you are, it would seem like a good time to head to a cave might be at the beginning of the sixth seal before much of this would start occurring. While it's possible that this could be spread out over a longer period of time, the way that the sixth seal and the first four trumpets tie together would seem to likely indicate this is all the same sort of event happening in stages from the same cause. If it is something in space that's causing this, it would seem it's one thing, one big event that's happening in short order, or at least fairly short order. But again, this is just conjecture. However, it does seem to match up. But also on this thought, when it comes to Nibiru or Planet X or a lot of the New Age ideas out there that there is some planetoid that's coming that might collide with Earth or things like that, I do wonder when it comes to any demonic forces at work with false prophecy, that usually it seems like the enemy counterfeits the truth in one way or another. And so a question I would have is, well, what might this Nibiru or Planet X be counterfeiting? If there was anything to it, it would seem like the truth might actually be referenced here in Revelation, hinted at and seeing the effects that something would be causing, and that it's possible demonic forces may be inspiring people to go along this line of thinking of something large coming as a counterfeit to what's actually here in Revelation. It was truly foretold, and that could of course in part be where they're getting the information and idea from, the demonic forces, is to counterfeit what's here in Revelation. It is at least a possibility that Revelation is foretelling something that actually is coming in the future, and that demonic forces are aware of this, and so implementing a plan to take the idea of something coming and turn it into something that's more occultic or New Age-ish in order to lead people into false belief systems that are contrary to the Bible, to Jesus Christ, and biblical truth, especially when it comes to a belief in aliens. So just some thoughts to think on there. Before the first four trumpets, though, during the sixth seal, there's going to be a partial rapture. And looking at the chart, and as for those who do get raptured, they're going to be taking what's represented as a rainbow here on the chart. They're going to be taking the rainbow path up to heaven, and they are not going to be coming back until the gathering. And the gathering occurs on the day of the Lord, the day when Jesus Christ returns, which will be coinciding on that day with the first resurrection coming first, because first the dead are going to rise, And then the living are going to be gathered from the four corners of earth and of heaven. And the living gathered from the four corners of heaven would be those who were raptured, and the living who are gathered from the four corners of the earth would be those Christians who are left behind in the rapture, and any other believers, believing Jews, they are going to be gathered from the four corners of the earth on the day when the Lord returns, along with the Christians who were raptured. And so this is the gathering that the Bible refers to on the day of the Lord. And the living are going to be changed to have their resurrection bodies, and then those who are part of the first resurrection will be resurrected to have their resurrection bodies also, like Jesus Christ had after the resurrection, and his body was changed to a resurrection body. And this is a big event that actually is spoken on in the New Testament. Some of those passages get misconstrued to be about the rapture when they are actually about the gathering, when on the day of the Lord all Christians will be gathered together. Paul spoke of this, and the apostles knew of this, and on that day, everyone who takes part in the first resurrection, like I would think the apostles are going to be there, all of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony of Jesus and because of the word of God, and those who had not worshipped the beast or his image and had not received the mark on their forehead and on their hand are going to be there, and all who are alive and remain are going to be there, and all those who are raptured are going to be there together and gathered together from wherever they are at, which it seems like Paul and the early Christians were looking forward to, and that's going to be fantastic. And so that's what's going to be happening with Christians who are raptured, is they are going to skip right over the 7 trumpets and the 7 bowls, and they are going to come back on the day of the Lord when Jesus Christ returns at the gathering. And so everything that comes after the 6th seal is not something we need to be concerned about, but it is going to be a partial rapture. And for any Christians who are left behind, I want to go into some more of things that they might need to know if they find themselves to have missed the rapture and to have been left behind.